Welcome to the Resistance.
Hey Xers, and welcome back to Gen X Resistance. I am your host, Paul Stevens, and thank you for making this podcast a part of your day. It's funny, or maybe it isn't. When you are young, you don't really think about your body breaking down. In your 20s and your 30s, you feel like you're indestructible. But one day, you hit a certain age, and reality shows up. And it's like, hey buddy, you've been abusing that back for decades, and now the bill is due. So I'm doing physical therapy about twice a week right now for what they call multi-level degenerative disc disease. It sounds really bad, but really what it means is that I'm getting older. I have what they call osteophytes on my spine, which are essentially bone spurs in my back and in my neck. And my body's not real happy about this right now. But the thing about therapy, it's not about magically fixing the problem. It's about strengthening the weak areas. It's about keeping things moving so they don't get worse and giving your body the best shot at functioning without constant pain. I'll be straight with you. I don't like the neck exercises. They hurt. They're awkward. And every time I do them, I think, you know what, screw this. I can just deal with the pain. I'll live with it. But those are the very exercises that I need the most. They hit the weak spots. They make me deal with the problem instead of ignoring them. And without them, the pain spreads, the structure breaks down, and eventually, surgery is the only option. And isn't that exactly where we are as a culture right now? We don't want to do the hard exercises. We don't want to face the weak spots. We'd rather take a pill, put on an ice pack, or just power through it. But if we don't work on those uncomfortable areas, the ones that we've neglected for far too long, like empathy, compassion, and our ability to have uncomfortable conversations, then we are headed for a cultural breakdown. And I think this is where Gen X has something to say. Yeah, we grew up tough, we walked it off, we figured things out. But toughness alone isn't enough. You see, resilience without empathy just turns into hardness. And hardness, if you don't check it, turns into isolation. And that's why I think we as Gen X need a kind of proverbial physical therapy, working on those areas where we are weak, even if it's uncomfortable and even if it hurts. If you caught my last episode, about Charlie Kirk, then you kind of know where I'm going with this. Agree with him or not, what he built was a platform for debate, for uncomfortable conversations. It was cultural physical therapy. It forced people to stretch muscles they don't like using anymore. The ability to hear an opposing viewpoint without falling apart. And when that kind of space disappears, when debate itself becomes too painful to handle, what happens? The weak spots spread. The structure breaks down. So here's the question. Are we willing to do the neck exercises? The ones that hurt, the ones that we want to skip, the ones that make us feel uncomfortable, but the ones that actually keep us from collapsing altogether. Because if we don't, the alternative isn't just more pain. The alternative is surgery. And trust me, you do not want to be awake for that operation. All right, so first, empathy. Look, I really suck at this one. Have you ever noticed how empathy feels like one of those stretches that your therapist makes you do? Like, seriously, I didn't even know that muscle existed. That's empathy in today's world. It's stiff, it's tight, and for a lot of people, it's barely functional. Gen X grew up in a culture where empathy wasn't exactly modeled for us. We were latchkey kids. We were left to figure things out. Nobody was sitting us down asking, and how do you feel about that? No, we got, suck it up. You'll live. Rub some dirt on it. And in all fairness, that built resilience. But resilience without empathy is like a body that's strong, but it can't bend. And that's just one bad move away from injury. What happens when a society can't bend? It snaps. Yeah, we see it now. People unable to imagine life outside their own bubble. Everyone's in pain, but instead of seeing that we're all carrying injuries, we assume that the other person's pain doesn't count. That's the opposite of empathy. And our exercise as Gen X, start practicing empathy again, even if it feels stiff and awkward. Not the performative kind plastered all over social media, but the real deal. Listening without trying to fix. Giving people a little bit of space to be human. Show some grace and humility. Because if we don't stretch this muscle, the cultural spine compresses and everything downstream starts to hurt. Okay, compassion. And to be honest, I'm not great at this one either. But it's a little different than empathy. Empathy is the stretch. Compassion is the strength. It's what you actually do once you feel something for someone else. And let's be honest, Gen X has a reputation for cynicism. We are sarcastic and skeptical, a little hardened by growing up in the shadows of boomers and before the world started bubble wrapping everybody. Compassion sometimes feels like a soft skill that we don't have time for. But without compassion, we default to coldness. And coldness might feel safe, but it isolates us. If empathy is the stretch that keeps us limber, compassion is the exercise that keeps us strong. And I'll be real, just like the neck exercises that I hate, compassion is uncomfortable. It will ask us to inconvenience ourselves. It asks us to do something for somebody without calculating what we're getting back. And that doesn't come naturally in a generation that learned early to watch its own back. Don't trust anybody. But if we don't build compassion, what happens? We end up with a society where nobody catches anybody when they fall. Everyone just shrugs and says, "Not my problem." And sooner or later, that catches up to us too. So our exercise here, practice small acts of compassion, even when they sting a little bit. The weight might feel heavy at first, but over time, that's how weak muscles get strong. All right, debate. All right, now I am pretty good at this one, or so I've been told by pretty much everybody. This one ties directly back to last week's Charlie Kirk episode. Debate used to be a core muscle of society. It wasn't always pretty, but it kept us strong. We could argue, disagree, even shout, and then still sit down at the same table. That's core strength. I believe that debate is at the center of a healthy society. And today, debate feels like a herniated disc. Nobody wants to touch it because it hurts too bad. People avoid it altogether, and the less we use it, the weaker that muscle gets. Now, even small disagreements feel catastrophic. All right, now this is where Gen X can step in. We grew up debating everything from politics to music to which Ninja Turtle was the best. And by the way, it's Michelangelo. It's always Michelangelo. We didn't always agree, but we learned how to stand our ground without disowning our friends. That's debate as therapy, not as combat, but as exercise. But here's the rub. Debate hurts. Like those neck exercises, it's not comfortable. It stretches you in ways you don't like. But the alternative is worse. If we don't rebuild this core muscle, society collapses into just this heap of one giant echo chamber, everybody curled up protecting their own pain. So our exercise here is simple, but tough. Don't shy away from hard conversations. Lean into them. Not to win, but to strengthen. That's how we keep the cultural spine from snapping. Okay, physical therapy does not promise a cure. It promises a little more strength, a little more flexibility, a little less pain. And that's enough for us to keep moving forward. Same with us. Gen X isn't going to fix all the world's problems, but we can work on our weak spots. Empathy, compassion, debate. They're not comfortable, they're not easy, but they're necessary. And if we don't do them, the breakdown comes a lot faster. And once you're on the table for surgery, again, you don't want to be awake for that operation. So yeah, I still hate the neck exercises, but I do them anyway, because the alternative is worse. And maybe, just maybe, that's the same approach that we need to take as a generation. Do the hard, uncomfortable work that keeps us and the people around us moving forward. All right, that's going to do it for me. Thanks for listening again. And if you want to get in contact with me, you can email me at genxresistance@gmail.com or leave a comment in the YouTube. Until next time, stay compassionate, stay empathetic. Most importantly, stay rad, my friends.